Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Welcome to NHL Wraparound for Wednesday, the 10th of December, 2025. Vic Morren, Neil Smith, an unbelievable Tuesday evening, which we're going to cover in three things you need to pay attention to. And we'll also be joined by a very special guest, longtime Anaheim Ducks TV analyst Brian Hayward, who is at one of the games that we're going to address in that segment. But I thought Monday was somewhat pedestrian as far as NHL goes. Tuesday more than made up for that with a number of games coming right down to the wire. And we do mean wire.
And you think you know who's going to win and lose these NHL games every night, because it's obvious when you get a top team versus a bottom team, a tired team versus a rested team. You don't know.
What are you saying?
That you just never know.
Well, we're going to get to that also in just a few minutes. But first, three things you need to pay attention to. And I'm going to kind of bury the lead with the Tuesday drama. And first, hit on a couple of things with the Toronto Maple Leafs, because the Buds are surging. They are 4-0-1 in their last five. They've given up only 8 goals in that span. And a big reason, rookie goaltender Dennis Hildeby, who is now fourth in goals against average at 2.15, and tied with the Wild's Jesper Wallstedt with a .936 save percentage. So with Joseph Woll perhaps expecting to come back during the course of the weekend, we don't know anything about Anthony Stolarz, who hasn't skated in about a month. This is a real breath of fresh air for Craig Berube's team, who apparently are finding out how to play defense a little bit.
Yeah, it's a miracle, really, when you think about it. When you went into the season thinking that Stolarz was number one and that Joseph Woll was number two, Dennis Hildeby's playing for the Marlies, and now all of a sudden Dennis Hildeby comes in and saves the day, at least in this early part of December. It really is a miracle for Craig Berube and that Toronto Maple Leafs team.
Hildeby getting his first career shutout Monday against the powerful Tampa Bay Lightning, who had both Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov back in their lineup. So certainly encouraging signs in Toronto. But as we say, we can never count on anything lasting anywhere in this league, no less in Toronto.
No, that's for sure. It won't be lasting too long anywhere, except for, some of the teams that are really bad continue to stay really bad.
Perhaps we will get to them at some point, but a reason that the Leafs' fortunes may not last is because their power play. You think they're missing Mitch Marner a little bit?
I think so.
They are 13.7%, 31st in the league, entering play on Wednesday. And to underscore where these numbers have been over the last several years, coming out of the pandemic, the first full season we had afterwards was 2021-22. Leafs were 27.3% first in the league, 22-23 second in the league, 23-24 seventh, last season tied for 8th. So top 10 all 4 years since we got back to an 82-game schedule. And you can't help but think that this is Marner's absence, because he was clearly the quarterback, the guy that could pass, the guy that could hold the puck, the guy that could draw the defense or keep them backed off. He was the magician back there. And Toronto has tried a number of different things this season. They have tried 5 forwards. They have now gone back to 4-1 with Morgan Riley on the first unit and Oliver Ekman-Larsson on the second. Auston Matthews doesn't seem to be connecting as much. William Nylander, ditto. So where do you see this landing? If you're Berube, you can't get another guy like Marner. That's not happening. So what would you be looking to do to get this thing back on track?
Well, you've got to design the power play differently. I mean, the thing is that, yeah, they don't have Marner anymore, but a lot of teams go through losing a guy and their power play doesn't drop to the bottom in the league, especially when they've got a Rocket Richard Trophy winner in their captain. They've got Nylander out there. They've got Riley on the point. They've got John Tavares that can come in and play really well. I mean, this power play should not be this bad. And yes, missing Marner is the key here, but you've got to plan around that. Berube and his staff have got to come up with a better game plan and work on it until they do better. It's really pathetic that you could have these many gifted offensive forwards and your power play be this bad.
So is it a matter of going back to the simplification of things? And you remember the terrific Toronto teams that they had in the early to mid 90s. And when their power play slumped, it was get it back to the point, shoot it, and go to the net. But it doesn't appear that this forward group works under that type of mentality, that they are still trying to finesse the puck into the net the same way that they were when Marner was quarterbacking.
Right. They just want to pass, and shoot instead of, as you said, when things aren't working, get it back to the point, get it on the net, converge on the net, and get some dirty goals. It doesn't seem like Nylander, and for that matter, Matthews. I think Nyes doesn't mind going into the blue paint, and Tavares doesn't mind going in, but you got to get in there and get some dirty goals while you're working on set plays.
And now item number 3, and the drama on Tuesday that saw 4 games forced to overtime with the goalie pulled, goals scored in the final seconds. In the game that you were at, UBS Arena, Pavel Dorofeev of the Golden Knights ties the game against the Islanders with 14 seconds left, and wound up being a 5-4 shootout loss to the Islanders. Emil Heineman with the shootout winner, Bo Horvat with his 18th and 19th goals of the season. But for all of that talent that the Golden Knights have, they are 3-9 in games decided after 60 minutes.
No, I know. I spent some time with Kelly McCrimmon, the general manager of the Golden Knights, last night before the game, and he was telling me that they've lost a lot of games in overtime this season. And, that part of that, though, we have to realize hangs on the fact that they didn't have a number 1 goalie playing for them for quite a while. They were using backup goalies and goalies from the minors because of the injuries that they've had. And now Carter Hart is there, who, by the way, played very well last night. So, yeah, the Golden Knights, they're going to have to get adjusted around, say, Carter Hart in the net, and then they got to start to win some games in OT.
Yeah, win a face-off, hold on to the puck, make something happen. Again, when you say you can't predict these things, let's go to our next game as we build the drama forward here. Cale Makar scores with 8 seconds left in the Avalanche 4-3 shootout loss in Nashville. Ryan O'Reilly scored the only goal in the shootout. The Avalanche, 2-7 beyond 60 minutes and 0-4 in the shootout. With that array of shooters, that is stunning.
It is. And, that's the only way I guess you beat the Colorado Avalanche is get them into overtime, because you sure don't beat them in regulation.
Nashville worked hard in that game. They deserved their fate, but they will play in Colorado coming up in the next few games. So I have to think there might be a little revenge factoring in there.
And but give Nashville credit. I mean, that's a daunting task to beat the Colorado Avalanche, who came in, neither team tired. They were rested. The Nashville comes out with a victory, something that's pretty stunning to a lot of people when you see that matchup.
The third game, Buffalo and Edmonton. Now, the Sabres came in after dropping a 7-4 decision to the Calgary Flames on Monday. The Flames are at the bottom of goals per game in the NHL. They're actually tied for 31st with Seattle. So they give up 7 goals, the Sabres do, to the Flames. They go into Edmonton. They're up 3-0 after the second period. And Connor McDavid scores 10 seconds in on a play that the Sabres thought should have been an icing call. McDavid scores, and you could almost feel what was going to happen, because Oilers get their second goal at the 156 mark, and then the Sabres hold on for the rest of the third period right up until the very end. McDavid scores with 1.9 seconds left. But in overtime, Alex Tuch scores 33 seconds in, so the Sabres somehow managed to salvage this game.
After coming in from Southern Alberta in Calgary, come in and play a rested Edmonton team that, by the way, was sitting at home watching them play Calgary on TV. And Edmonton, one of the top teams in the league, obviously, and yet Buffalo's able to come in and win that. Like, you can't predict this stuff. Buffalo can't beat themselves at times, and yet they go in and beat Edmonton in Edmonton after playing 24 hours earlier. It's stunning.
Who, by the way, had scored 15 goals in their previous 2 games coming into that game against the Sabres.
Unreal.
I'll give you a little bit more unreal as we wrap up this segment. In Pittsburgh, Beckett Seneca of the Anaheim Ducks scored a shorthanded goal with 0.01 seconds left to tie the game with the Penguins. Shot that caromed in off Erik Karlsson. The Ducks had a faceoff in their own end of the ice with 17.5 seconds left and still managed to get the puck down the ice to tie it. Leo Carlsson with the shootout winner. Ville Husso with 44 saves. And the magic just continues in this first half of the season for Anaheim.
And we talked about the Toronto Maple Leafs when Dennis Hildeby coming in to give them the miracle workers routine with their top 2 goalies out. How about in Anaheim, Ville Husso, was in the minors for them as well. He's their number 3 guy. While they've got their top 2 guys out of the lineup, he makes 44 saves, gets them the victory on the first game of this road trip, as you said, in Pittsburgh. And Beckett Seneca, with that sensational goal, is going to give all other rookies in the NHL a run for the Calder Trophy. We'll see how it ends up. Obviously, early predictions are that Matthew Schaefer of the New York Islanders is the lead dog in that. But take a look at this. Beckett Seneca, if you get a chance on Anaheim, sensational rookie. But anyways, the last game of 4 very odd games.
And a great ducktail into our discussion with Brian Hayward. And that'll wrap up 3 things you need to pay attention to. So let's bring Brian in.
Well, we're really excited to bring Brian Hayward on to NHL Wraparound. I've known Brian for many years. He does a fantastic job for the Ducks because he's the only one that's ever done it for the Ducks. Hazy, thanks for doing this.
My pleasure. Anytime, guys.
Yeah, that's great. You know, we really enjoy, I do anyway, really enjoy watching. I enjoy watching all the guys that I personally know. It seems to be more fun. Brian Engblom in Tampa. Yeah. Of course, the Islander guys and Kenny Albert doing national games, Eddie Olchuk and that. But just so everybody understands, you've been the analyst, the TV analyst for the Ducks when they were the Mighty Ducks in 93, 94 up till today. How did you get started in this business of broadcasting?
You know what? It was a fluke, total fluke. I was, the end of my career, I was in San Jose. I've blocked out most of those days, by the way, because our team was not good. And as a goaltender, we got shelled every night. But the color analyst in San Jose was Dennis Hull. And I don't know why, but Dennis got fired. And so I was the injured player. I had major back issues at the end of my career. I was the injured guy just hanging around rehabbing. They needed somebody to help out on the broadcast. And they said, do you want to give it a whirl? So I stepped in and I did about 5 broadcasts with the Sharks. And I thought that was the end of my broadcasting career. And I was ready to go back to school. I went undergrad to Cornell, and I was accepted into the MBA program there. And I was going to go back, and that was a different path for me. And then Disney got their expansion franchise, the Mighty Ducks. And somebody called me and offered me the job, and I turned it down a couple of times because I didn't know, that wasn't the path that I was on. And one day my wife said to me, you don't want to go back to school. Why don't you try this? And so I ended up signing a 2-year deal with Disney. And here I am 32 years later, still working the job. It's a great gig. I love it.
And just over a year ago, you did your 2000th game.
Yeah. There's something to be said for longevity, I guess. But yeah, and it was a good moment for me. And in true Anaheim Duck fashion, they paid tribute to me, and it was really nice. I mean, we've got a special group, I think, with the Ducks, and starts at the top. The ownership, the Samuelis, they treat everybody like family, and they've been wonderful to me.
And that game, of course, that 2000th game last December came against your old team, the Montreal Canadiens, where you were very well. You played very well with Patrick Roy during the late 80s.
Yeah, a long time ago, right? It was nice. And, we did the game in Montreal, and they flashed it up on the scoreboard, and it was a nice tribute from them that I really appreciated.
Now, when you go tomorrow night to UBS Arena and play the Islanders, and I know you've done this before because you play them twice a year, and Patrick Roy's been there for a year and a half now, I believe, almost 2 years. Will you see Patrick before the game?
I'll talk to him very briefly. I try not to get in the way of guys when they're working. And Pat and I had a great relationship when we were goaltending partners, but it's more a little smile when we see one another. And I think our interactions probably last about a minute or two. Just how you doing? How's the family? Are you enjoying it? That type of thing. How's your body holding up? That's a common one amongst old hockey players. But it's always good to see him, and I'm thrilled that he's back in the game because he's such a great personality, and our game needs more of those guys.
Hazy, last one from me on this broadcasting fun sort of stuff. I've got my own theory as to the answer of this question, but I want to hear it from you. Why is it that so many goaltenders make great analysts, and a lot of them haven't been the Patrick Roys of their time or the Marty Brodeurs? They've been the Brian Haywards of their time, which, let's say Jake Allen might go and be a great analyst after his career is over in New Jersey. Why do you think that is?
I think because we spend a lot of time rationalizing who else was at fault before the goal went into the back of the net. Because most people, you're the last line of defense and you're the last guy that makes a mistake. If you believe that every puck is stoppable, then when you get scored on, you've made a mistake. But prior to that, how did the shot get through? How did the 2-on-1 develop? How did the breakaway happen? That's the way goaltenders keep their sanity. And so I think it's natural for us to kind of have a whole view of the game. and understand a lot of the nuances. There's a lot of great shooters I know, for example, that have no idea how goaltenders think or how they will react in certain situations. But goaltenders are the only ones that know that in terms of where the shot is coming from and where the traffic is, where the potential danger is. You have to be, as a goaltender, a little bit of a pessimist and be thinking about all of those kind of nuanced elements of the game in order to be real good at your position. So I think that's the reason why.
Just talked about sanity. How about some insanity that took place in Pittsburgh on Tuesday evening? And in the opening segment, Neil and I actually addressed this game. So this is the first game of a 5-game road trip for the team. They'll also be at UBS Arena on Thursday. Then they go to Jersey. Chris Kreider's return to Madison Square Garden next Monday. And then you wrap it up against the Columbus Blue Jackets. But 8 years without making the playoffs. Last night was one of those games that there is no way that they win that game in any of those years. Shorthanded, face off in your own zone with 17 and a half seconds left. The club was off the entire night.
Yep.
They couldn't make crisp passes. The entire game, it felt like they were behind the step.
Yeah.
And yet, Beckett Seneca gets the bounce, goes in off Carlson. They win in the shootout with Leo Carlson scoring. And just a remarkable way to kick off a road trip that I think is going to continue to define this team.
Well, those types of games, I won't say that specific game will define this team. But the thing that does define this team is a couple of things, actually. Number one, their young talent carries them offensively, and they've got incredible young talent. Number two, they always feel that they're never out of it, even when they play terribly. And that hasn't happened very often, by the way, but 4 or 5 times this year, they've been able to outscore their problems or find a way, and they found a way again last night. It's absolutely insane that they were able to squeeze 2 points out of that one. They had no business. John and I joked that they should all be wearing masks when they left the arena because that was larcenous. There's no other way to describe it. But this team, there is a belief that they can score, and that's the biggest difference, I think, from last year. That these young guys are scorers. Seneca's a scorer, Carlson's a scorer, Cutter Gauthier's a scorer. These guys are all 19, 20, and 21 years of age, and they're going to be superstars in this league. And it's a really exciting time in Anaheim because we're seeing these young guys start to flourish, and they've got great support for some great veterans. But those young guys are, there is never a dull moment with them, let me tell you.
And nothing's more exciting than goal scoring. And team is scoring 3.57 goals per game, but second only to Colorado in the entire NHL. So they're in pretty good company. And they were also one of only 4 clubs since 2000 that had scored 7 or more goals in 5 out of their first 30 games. So you're talking about some pretty lofty numbers here, and exactly to your point about the way that this team can put the puck in the net.
Yeah, they're really exciting. They haven't learned to play defense as well as certainly Joel Quenneville would like them to play. But Joel sums it up. He goes, "There's just never a dull moment with this team," and it's so true. Joel has opened things up. He encourages his D to become part of the attack and come right down to the top of the goal crease all the time. Whenever they have possession in the offensive zone, they're trying to create some chaos and confusion, and it makes for a really entertaining game. They have to be, if not the most exciting, certainly one of the top 2 or 3 most exciting teams to watch. They are just fun, and there's no other way to describe it, and they're having fun. And you can sense that when you talk to the guys. Even the veterans have got new life this year.
Yeah.
Because I think because of the kids and how they can explode offensively, but just that the games are entertaining as hell.
Yeah.
And Brian, Pat Verbeek also has brought in some interesting veterans to help groom this young core. Obviously, my background, and so I'm most interested in what Jacob Trouba and Chris Kreider have brought to the Ducks, because I think both of those guys should still be on the Rangers if there was anybody watching. But tell me what Trouba and Chris Kreider have brought.
I love how you choose your words carefully there, Neil. That was good. They've been great from multiple standpoints. Number one, when you have as many young guys to bring in that caliber of leadership into the locker room has a huge effect on them, right? Because sometimes the kids need to be corralled a little bit. And those are two strong voices inside the locker room. From what I hear, because I'm not in the room, but this is my understanding. Trouba, to me, has been reborn. He looks like the Jacob Trouba of, 6 years ago. He's a menace on the ice. He's intimidating, but he also has a calmness about him. When the puck is on his stick, he has the patience to look people off and make plays. And it's a great influence for some of the young defensemen we have, because we've got a bunch of them in the lineup. He's played a lot with Olen Zellweger right so far, who's 22 years of age and still kind of learning when to jump in, when not to jump in. So I can't say enough about Jacob and his contribution to the team. Kreider got off to an unbelievable start. What I didn't realize about Chris Kreider, because I haven't seen him that much playing the Rangers, twice a year, is that just how powerful he is. He uses that frame of his to protect the puck so well, and he's got that innate sense that he can recover pucks. He kind of understands where it's going after the puck is shot, right? So he gets to a lot of pucks, keeps plays alive in the offensive zone. And then he gets to the front of the net, and he has those magical hands where he can tip pucks and bang home rebounds. So what Chris Kreider has done is he has lit a fire under our power play. This was a team, their power play was 11% last year, right?
Wow.
Dead last in the league. One of the worst power play percentages in history. Kreider comes in. I think they're just above the middle of the pack right now. But again, he's kind of a captain or a general out there on the ice, and he has a lot of thoughts about what has to happen for the power play to be successful. So both of those guys, those ex-Rangers, been terrific adds by Pat Verbeek.
A couple of guys that were there beforehand that were brought in from other clubs were Alex Killorn and your captain, Radko Gudas.
Yep.
And when they joined the Ducks, and I remember Neil and I talking about this, that was almost as if, well, why these guys at that time? Because a year ago, the team wasn't really close to being any sort of contender.
Right.
And it didn't make sense. And boy, it makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah, it sure does. And again, leadership in the room. Gudas is another guy that forces people to play with their heads up, right? He hits and he hits and he hits. And he's really consistent. He plays a very simple game. He moves the puck quick. He's not going to generate a ton of offense. He has a surprisingly heavy shot, which I didn't know about Radko. But I think it's that physicality that he brings that, again, makes these young guys sit a little taller. When you have a Gudas in the lineup, you have a Trouba in the lineup, you have Ross Johnston in the lineup. It allows them to do all the creative things they want to do without getting abused. And he's an important ad. And Alex Killorn's just an honest player, a good penalty killer. He's not going to put up the kind of numbers that he put up at times in Tampa, But in terms of a guy on your third line or a guy that you want out there when you're protecting a 1-goal lead late in the game, he's a great ad.
Brian, I want to talk about somebody you and I have known for an awful long time. I met Joel Quenneville when he first got to St. Louis, and Larry Plow was the GM, and known him ever since, and obviously. And he's, sat a couple of years he wasn't coaching. And then Pat Verbeek, he was on our show and explained how he knew Joel from their Hartford days, and they ride to practice together, and they used to talk hockey all the time. So we're very familiar with each other. So it was a natural for Pat to reach out to Joel. But Joel has had to evolve somewhat in this new league that wasn't the same league 3 years ago. And I wonder what you have noticed in his evolvement, just like you've noticed in all the way the team is evolving. How's Joel Quenneville evolving to deal with today's NHL players?
Well, to be honest, Neil, I didn't know Joel hardly at all before he got to Anaheim. So my perspective on him is based on what I have seen since I've come to know him, since he arrived in town. He's a fun guy, number one. I think I remember the first day of practice after the roster was set, after training camp had ended. I was watching practice, and he blew the whistle, called everybody in the middle, and you could hear a pin drop, right? I mean, he brings with him that credibility, 3 Stanley Cups, second wing as coach of all time. And so he commands the respect of everyone and the attention. Maybe more importantly, with modern players, he commands the attention of them immediately. I was really interested to see what he was going to do kind of systems-wise, what the messaging was going to be. And his primary message to these guys was freedom. I don't know if that was his message in Chicago or Florida earlier in his career, but he opened things up for these players and let them be creative offensively. And it has worked. I mean, it has absolutely worked wonders because some games where they really struggle defensively, they outscore their problems. And to me, the other thing that I've noticed with him is the emphasis on pace. Everything is to be done at the absolute highest speed, including his practices. His practices are unbelievably short, like 35 minutes max. He is never standing at a whiteboard and explaining a drill. That's done before they get on the ice. And everything is done at pace, at tempo, until he blows the whistle, and then he gets the heck off the ice, and the guys are left to mess around on the ice if that's what they want to do. But there's just a sense about him that the players trust what he sees. And I will say this about Joel. In my career, I played in the league for 11 years. I think in all that time, I think I had one coach who I considered to be masterful at looking at the game 10 minutes into the opening period and knowing which guys were going and which guys were not going and making that adjustment on the fly in his lineup. And that was Pat Burns. The only guy I had in 11 years in the NHL that had that unique gift. And Quenneville's got that gift. And we've seen it a lot this year where he has benched players 10 minutes into the opening period who are top 6 forwards. He's made changes on the fly. And so the messaging, again, beyond freedom is performance gets rewarded and non-performance, well, you're going to be sitting down. And that's something that has been really noticeable with Joel.
Do you see the trajectory of this club similar to Quenneville's teams in Chicago, particularly starting with the Cup in 2010 when they had the great youth at that time with Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews? Do you see the Ducks perhaps almost following a little bit of a similar model? I mean, there's a long way to go, but any similarities?
we hope. I mean, we certainly hope that, right? So will Seneca and Carlson become Kane and Taves? I guess that's the most frequent question I think that Joel gets asked. And he sees a lot of similarities, but he's also, he's not going to anoint them with that level of accolade, I guess, and until they've earned it. And that's the way he is. But I think it's exciting where the organization is at. We have a lot of assets in the American League, especially on the blue line, that I think multiple teams, the majority of teams, would like to get their hands on. So Pat Verbeek's got some real assets that when the time is right or when the opportunity presents itself, he's got people that he can move, I think, to make the big deal. It's just a question of timing for him.
You have any update on Lukas Dostal? Because, as we said earlier in our show, Ville Husso was outstanding last night, although had a little bit of bad puck luck on 2 of the goals, took a holding the stick penalty that actually put the team behind late in the third period. But Dostal should be in that window where he's close to returning. Petr Mrazek is also out. So can you tell us where things are with the goaltenders?
Lukas, I think, is getting close. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him at some point on this trip starting. Yesterday was the first time that he was on the ice for a full morning skate and stayed out for the entire time with the other scratches. So he's getting close. And it's been 2 weeks. We were told originally that his injury would be a 2 to 3 week timeline. So I think he's right on track. I will tell you this kid, I am an enormous fan of Lukas because he is a technician. He's not the biggest guy. He's not your modern 6'4" monster NHL goaltender. He's got to move, and he really can move. And he reads the play. He's in phenomenal condition physically, and he's gonna be a top flight number 1 goaltender for a decade because he really takes care of himself. Fluke injury, and he's not going to miss that significant amount of time, and the team is holding up, and Ville Husso's come in and done a real nice job. I should point out, too, when we lost Dostal and then we lost Petr Mrazek, we also lost down in the minor leagues, Calle Klang, who is our number 4 goaltender. So Husso came up. We have right now Slava Bataev's up. He's the number 5 string goaltender in the organization. So things were getting pretty thin there for a while, but Husso has answered the bell. He's been terrific. He's been rock solid. He's not Lukas Dostal, but he's been solid enough, and he's got a winning record. And I don't think you can hope for much more than that.
And Dostal is the goaltender that the franchise has put their trust in by moving longtime veteran John Gibson to Detroit.
Yeah, he outplayed John the last 2 years, I would say, quite honestly. And I don't mean to say that to disparage John Gibson at all, but Lukas was the better of the two and the younger of the two. And, I think for me, what sealed the deal for Pat Verbeek was when Dostal won the World Hockey Championships and, representing the Czech Republic. And he was the reason why they won. And when they saw that level at that intense competition, I think the tournament was in Prague, actually, when they won it, it must have been unbelievable. It must have been crazy. Neil, I know you've been over there a few times. But I think that sealed the deal, that in big games, in high-pressure games, once this team is now a playoff team and then a contending team, they got a guy that can perform. So in my mind, that would have sealed the deal for Pat, that he could move on from Gibson. The Ducks, Sudsy Sudarshan Maharaj is the head of our goaltending department, does a great job, and he's always scouring the planet looking for the next one. We've got a kid over in the Swedish league named Damian Clara, who's 6'6", having a great year in the Swedish league, and that's the next one that Sudsy's kind of tabbed as a big potential guy.
Brian, last question before I let you go, and I only thought of this because of the conversation about Dostal and Mrazek. You being a goaltender, having watched all these thousands of games, I have my own theory on this again, but tell me yours. Why do we see so many goaltending injuries today that we didn't used to see? We would have goaltenders. I mean, we can go back to Glenn Hall, but that's crazy. Played 8 years every game for 8 straight years. But even in your time, goaltenders, I mean, you didn't see minor league goalies up all the time on all the different teams. We didn't, even in the 90s, we didn't sign a third NHL goaltender because we were worried about injury. But today, right, goaltenders get hurt all the time. And why is that?
No, we were a lot tougher back then, Neil. There's no
yeah. Okay, besides that fact.
Yeah. No, I think the big reason is as the style of goaltending has evolved, right? There are more guys, butterfly guys who spend time on their knees, and it puts a lot of pressure on the hip joints, like just an absolute ton of pressure. And the equipment that they wear, the goal pads, they're not leather, they're a synthetic material. They really slide on the ice. So if you can imagine, if people at home ever get down into that butterfly position and try and fan your heels a little, just an inch further out to get a little bit more coverage at the bottom of the net, it puts tremendous amount of stress on the hip joint. And, there's a guy out in Vancouver that writes a magazine about goaltenders, Dan, I can't remember his last name, but he did a study about the hip joint with goaltenders because that's the prevalent injury with goalies, right? And he told me that, at the top of the femur that fits into the socket, everybody's genetics are a little bit different. And if that femur is a little bit squared off, then it irritates the inside of the joint. That's why you get all these labrum tears, and that's the big injury for goalies. So unless your top of your femur is rounded off, you're going to have labrum issues as a goaltender if you play that style, because everybody's looking for just a little bit more coverage down low and to fan those legs out a little bit wider. And sometimes it has the wrong effect. That's my theory.
Do you think there's any credence to the fact that they're so much bigger than they used to be? And so therefore, and when you're standing still and somebody runs into you, you got a lot more chance of being hurt than when you're constantly moving. And if you're not 6'6", is there anything to that the size and the fact that they are getting bumped into all the time and they're a bigger target, maybe?
I don't think they get bumped into hardly at all compared to the old days. So I don't think that's it. I think we took a lot more contact than these guys take in today's game, and that's a good thing. And boy, I could talk for hours about why we have 6'5", 6'6" goaltenders, and it is because of the equipment. It used to be that we had to keep our stick on the ice in order to protect that area between our feet. But now the way the pads are, they rotate forward, they cover the 5-hole. And so, whereas in my era, I thought tall goaltenders were at a little bit of a disadvantage, guys like Mike Liut, because their 5-hole was bigger. They had to keep their stick on the ice, but there was a space there. Now, all they have to do is fall. And the pads, they're so ergonomically well constructed that they just flip forward, take care of the 5-hole. They don't have to cover that area with their stick. They clamp their arms into their body. Nothing can go through them. And so there's a real advantage for size now that didn't used to exist. But the bad part of that is because they've been taught now, take care of the 5-hole, just fall. It's the pressure on the hip joints, and that's why we're seeing so many injuries.
Well, Hazy, this whole thing has been great. I mean, nobody knows the Ducks the way you do, and you've seen every generation of general manager and coach and players and everything, and a Stanley Cup way back when with Brian Burke and Randy Carlisle. And this has been really good. And we really appreciate this, and we wish you luck and hope you get in another 2,000 games.
There's not a chance, but I appreciate that. It was fun, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, guys. See ya.
Neil, if we didn't have the proper insight on the Anaheim Ducks, we certainly have it now, because I think everything that we got out of this discussion with Brian Hayward certainly gives you exactly where this team is, from the GM to the coach to the players to the goaltending.
Oh, absolutely. And Brian Hayward, it's not hard to understand why he's such a good analyst for the Ducks and has been doing it for so many years. He is so cerebral and his thought process is so analytical. I love interviews like that because I learn so much and it helps me watch the game better.
And he's always going to be linked with Patrick Waugh for sharing 3 Jennings trophies in 1987, 1988, and 1989.
Yeah. So he's got that going for him. I found it interesting, that tomorrow night, Patrick Waugh will be on one side of the building and he'll be literally on the other side of the building doing his analysis.
And like you said, I don't think it'll be another 2,000 games, but certainly would like to see Brian enjoy a long playoff run.
Yeah. So good luck to the Ducks, Pat Verbeek, Joel Quenneville, and even Brian Hayward.
Neil, as we move forward here, occasionally I like to put you back into that GM chair, and I've identified 3 clubs that I'd like you to share with our listeners where you assess them as we get to the 30-game mark in the season. We're going to go top tier, middle tier, lower tier, based on the standings right now. And I'm going to start with the Colorado Avalanche. And we had general manager Chris McFarland on a year ago. They had a very disappointing first-round loss to the Dallas Stars, losing a 2-0 lead in Game 7, being victimized by Mikko Rantanen, former Avalanche, of course. Their notable adds during the offseason were Gavin Brindley, who was acquired in a trade with Columbus for Miles Wood and Charlie Coyle, and Brent Burns, 40 years old, signed as a UFA. So as good as this start has been for the Avalanche, are these parts enough to get them over the top? And perhaps we could also look at what happened last year as just a part of growing pains as they try to get their first Stanley Cup since last winning in 2022.
Which isn't that long ago when you think about it. We're only in 2025. So I can't call it growing pains for the Colorado Avalanche because most of their high-level players were there for the 22 Cup. The one thing I see different about their team this year from a year ago, early December last year, is their goaltending is much better. Last year, they had to change both goaltenders. That was a huge change. Then they had the Rantanen thing going on during the season where they were going to have to make a move, either sign him to what they thought was too much money or move him on. They ended up moving him to Carolina, who subsequently moved him right to Dallas. I love the way Brent Burns plays. I think he's been a good addition for them. I think he's a steadying influence for their young players. I think they're going to have to add more, though, as the season goes on. They're going to have to add some more defensive style players. They've definitely got enough offense, but do they have enough Bob Gainies on their team? I think we'll have to wait and see.
Do you like this club right now? Like, if you were to start the playoffs today, do you think they can win the Cup with this lineup?
If the playoffs started today, I do.
Even without adding anything?
Even without adding anything. Because you've got to take that nobody else gets to add anything either if we start today. So, I mean, if it's exactly the rosters you have today, I don't see anybody beating them in a 7-game series. I don't see anyone beating them 4 times in 7 games.
Let's move on to our second team. The New Jersey Devils, despite their win in Ottawa, who are having their own issues right now, they were still 5-8 without Jack Hughes. For Tom Fitzgerald, is New Jersey too dependent on one player for its particular identity, which is the transition and speed game through center ice, which they have been very good when Hughes is in the lineup? But truth is, Jack Hughes has missed 90 games over the past 5 seasons. And when you look at the shoulder injury that he suffered late in the year last season, they were cooked because they couldn't execute their play. So if you're Fitzgerald, you know that you've got a guy that's got an injury history. It's not to say that Hughes isn't going to come back and he'll play the rest of the season and everything is going to be fine. But in the case of the Devils, where are you looking to augment here, knowing that apparently, based on the records and based on the history, they are so dependent on Jack Hughes?
They really are. But the other thing that they're not getting this year that really stands out like a sore thumb is goaltending. Jacob Markstrom has not been what he was last season. He's not been what he was at times for Calgary Flames. And they were depending on him to be the clear-cut number one and Jake Allen to be the veteran, really good backup team guy in the locker room. And that hasn't happened. And I think that deficiency has shown up in defensive woes for them. Now, without Hughes, they're not that same team that backs everybody off, because Jack Hughes backs the other teams off. I don't know that they're too dependent upon him, but I think that they are certainly in some ways dependent upon him to be who their signature is, which is an offensive team that you've got to sort of back off from and worry about. And I'm sure that the players on the Devils right now don't have the confidence level that they've had in the past when they are shaky defensively and don't have the big scorer up front.
Let's also be fair that back line has really been banged up during the course of the year. And Markstrom had a terrific game in Ottawa, despite giving up a couple of goals early in that game. Had a little bit of fire going also. So I think if this team is going to progress, they're going to need Markstrom to be on his game. And perhaps just Ottawa banging that crease and trying to get him off his game maybe lit that fire that he's going to be able to gain a little bit of traction as the season continues to go forward.
Well, they're going to need him to do that if they hope to get out of the, to get past the first or second round of the playoffs. And they're also, as you have already said, Vic, they got to get a healthy Jack Hughes that they can depend on will be there for periods of time. Now, look, he's out right now because he cut his finger off the ice on a broken glass and needed surgery. That's not going to happen every day. I mean, that's a weird thing. If it was his shoulder again, if it was some body part injured in hockey, that's one thing. But I don't think we can say that he's injury prone based upon this injury. I think we're going to have to see how long he can stay in the lineup once he comes back from this finger surgery.
Devils enter play on Wednesday. Wild card 3 with 35 points, but that's also the same total as the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Philadelphia Flyers, who are 1-2. Let's go to the third team, the Vancouver Canucks. Thatcher Demko is set to return on Thursday against Buffalo. He has been out since November 11th with a lower body injury. But is that even going to matter at this point? Because we remember 2 years ago, they had a very impressive opening round against Nashville, took Edmonton to 7 games, and they went out, they signed a lot of players last year. Didn't work out. You had the JT Miller, Elias Pettersson drama that was going on. Even though they made a push for the playoffs at the end, the season was a huge disappointment. And now they're towards the bottom of the league standings. Their captain, Quinn Hughes, has 1 year left on a contract that's paying him a little less than $8 million a year. This is a real crossroads for this franchise who, as we know, came into the NHL along with the Buffalo Sabres in 1970. They never won a Stanley Cup. They thought they were making big strides going into last season. It's not even close right now.
No, I don't like this team. I just don't. I mean, I don't like the way that their number one goalie, Demko, is in and out of the lineup, hurt all the time. Not blaming him for that. I'm just saying I wouldn't like it if I was running the Vancouver Canucks. I don't like Elias Pettersson. I don't think he has been that great for them. He's certainly not a warrior of any type. They re-signed Brock Besser after he didn't want to sign back there and said he was going to go someplace else. Now he's back there. They have a couple of good pieces, and Sherwood is a good player, and they've got DeBrusk that they signed from Boston a year ago. But I just don't like their team. I don't think it's missing a lot of parts, and it's missing some kind of an ingredient that they need, some kind of leadership ingredient that doesn't seem to appear. Now, you talk about Quinn Hughes. He's a fantastic defenseman, a Norris Trophy winner. Now there's rumors about him wanting to get out of Vancouver. And, you know, none of this is any good. Like, they should shut the media down in Vancouver. This goes on all the time. There's always media talk because somebody from the Vancouver management always talks to them and says something that starts a big story. So they can't let Quinn Hughes go, or they're basically sending themselves to relegation in the American League. This is they're in a tough situation. What would I do if I'm Patrick Alvin? I honestly don't know. There's so much work to be done there.
So you've got really two paths here. Either you try to build back based on what you already have, or you separate with some major parts, and that could be Hughes, who could bring back more at the trade deadline this year because he still has 1 year worth of term on his contract. You mentioned Kiefer Sherwood. His name is being mentioned. He's been connected to the Minnesota Wild. So you're clearly at a fork in the road here.
You are, but I would never trade Quinn Hughes. I would re-sign him. And if he says I'm not re-signing, then I guess you're faced with no other option. Although that's what Brock Besser said last year, and he re-signed. You can't let Quinn Hughes get out of there. I mean, this might be their Kaprizov, because the Minnesota Wild knew they couldn't let Kirill Kaprizov get out of there. They couldn't let him walk, so they gave him what he wanted. They might have to do this in Vancouver with Quinn Hughes, because without Quinn Hughes, as soon as he walks out the door, all hope walks out the door with him in Vancouver.
Good perspective. Let's do the personnel update. Happy return for David Pastrnak in Boston. He comes back Tuesday in St. Louis after missing 5 games with a lower body injury. He gets 3 assists in the 5-2 Bruins win. But I want to make a point here. Fraser Minten and Mark Kastelik, 2 goals apiece. These are bottom 6 forwards, and I think speaks to why this team is having success under Marco Sturm this year, is that Morgan Geekie has been fabulous. Pastrnak is who he is. But you've got a lot of guys that are giving that supplemental scoring in just the right spot to keep the Bruins afloat this year.
They are. It's amazing. It's really, truly amazing. They're getting contributions all through their roster. This isn't just David Pastrnak and a bunch of other players wearing a Bruins uniform. And don't forget, they've had Charlie McAvoy out for a long time with getting hit in the face with that puck, and he's a huge part of their team. And they really haven't suffered mightily because of it. So I agree with you. I think that whatever Marco Sturm is telling the team, it's working. At this point, I think he should be a Jack Adams Award candidate because you've taken a team that no one expected anything from, and they're right in the pack.
Other returns, J.G. Pageau for the Islanders came back in Tuesday's shootout win over Vegas. He had missed the last 8 games with an upper body injury. Now the guys that have been injured. Logan Cooley, now listed as indefinite. He hurt his leg wrapping it around a goalpost in Vancouver. Remember, he had escaped a serious injury when he was kneed by Alexei Toropchenko in St. Louis on the 29th of November. For the Pittsburgh Penguins, getting Malkin to IR with an upper body injury. He's listed week to week. Blake Lizotte, another forward on the Penguins, also on IR. Jason Zucker, who had recently returned after missing 8 games due to a virus, will now miss some time with both upper and lower body injuries suffered in Monday's loss in Calgary in a game in which he had 2 assists. Matt Zuccarello left the Minnesota Wild's win in Seattle on Monday after taking an open ice hit from Vince Dunn. Jake Middleton, defenseman, also went out in that game. Zuccarello had missed the first 15 games in the season, and Neil, you have pointed out that that team really started to roll after he came back in the lineup. And not only was it a hard check that Zuccarello absorbed, but his face also hit the ice going down. And if he is out for any time again, and we didn't have any update as I checked this morning, but if he's out again, let's see how Minnesota responds this time around.
Right. And you know, the one thing I want to mention is we talk about the compressed schedule and players playing more often than in a usual season because they're trying to get all the games in before and after the Olympics. This might be an example that is a very subtle example of what happens when players are physically and mentally tired. Matt Zuccarello might not have been looking the wrong way when Vince Dunn came through. And you can talk about other players that are getting injured, but like a Matt Zuccarello is a long-time veteran player that has an awareness, spatial awareness about what's on the ice, who's on the ice, when to lean in one direction or the other. It seems peculiar to me that he took that hard of an open ice hit from Vince Dunn. And the same may be true with others. That this, you can't minimize the amount of impact that a being tired, both mentally and physically, has on these players when they're playing in the best league in the world.
Other news, Jordan Kyrou, the St. Louis Blues, week to week, after suffering a lower body injury. It was actually a leg injury on Saturday in Ottawa, but an MRI revealed better than expected news. So this could be a short-term injury for Kyrou. Bobby McMahon, Toronto Maple Leafs, suspended 1 game for a match penalty on a high stick against Oliver Bjorkstrand of the Lightning on Monday. This particular suspension is getting a little bit of scrutiny because while he did chop down on Bjorkstrand, people are looking back to when Jacob Trouba took a shot at Trent Frederick in 2023, which I thought was a vicious high stick, and he was fined $5,000 and no suspension. So the inconsistency in terms of how the Department of Player Safety looks at things just continues to go on here.
It really is. And I don't know what the formula is to get things that they're more predictable and what suspensions and fines would be for certain things. I don't know if this is a fact of a committee making these decisions there, or is it just one guy making them, but there is inconsistency in how these penalties, meaning suspensions or fines, are doled out by player safety.
Also in that game, Gage Gonsalves of the Lightning was ejected for kneeing defenseman Dakota Mermis, and Toronto's already got a banged-up back line. Mermis was supposed to be evaluated on Tuesday. No update on his condition yet. And I got one other one for you. This is really unusual, that at the end of that Nashville, Colorado game on Tuesday, Scott Wedgwood was run into by Philip Forsberg, completely accidental, on the shootout attempt. Now, Wedgwood wound up stopping Steven Stamkos on the next shot, but then the referee's got a call down that Wedgwood should be looked at because the back of his head hit the ice in that collision. He wound up getting pulled out of the game, and Mackenzie Blackwood came in and just stood in the crease while the final shot that was taken by Gabriel Landeskog missed, and the Predators wind up winning the game in the shootout. But I don't think we've ever seen that before. That incident takes place, guy faces another shot, and then he gets pulled.
Because of the concussion spotters and the protocol that they go through. Yeah, I've never seen that before. We have seen a shootout start and the other goalie go in the net.
That we have seen. But this one was really unusual. But I want to pose a question to you because I already know the answer. So this is one of the few ways
you like asking those questions.
Yeah, I do. Did Blackwood get credit for a game played?
No, I don't think so. Did he?
That is correct. Because he just stood in the crease, but there was nothing active going on for him because the shootout ended on the next shot. Had Landeskog scored, then Blackwood would have become the goalie of decision. So he could have gotten a win or a loss without playing any minutes.
Great stuff.
And a great way to end our show. Thanks to Anaheim Ducks TV analyst Brian Hayward for joining us today.
Longtime goaltender, also in the National Hockey League, Brian Hayward. We got to mention that. Thanks to the listeners. Reach us individually if you want on email at neil@nhlwraparound.com or vic@nhlwraparound.com. Don't forget that every podcast we do is on every platform, including Apple, Amazon, iHeart, Spotify, and of course, YouTube. And please hit subscribe.
We want to push towards that 1,000 mark. Our website, nhlwraparound.com, has our complete history of all of our podcasts. And in our blog section, the latest New York-centric piece by Patrick Hoffman, the outstanding play in the New York Islanders net by Ilya Sorokin. We have Neil's Nuggets. And Neil, you put something out there about teams returning home after road trips of at least 4 games and how the math works, whether they struggle in that first game back or they succeed. You want to give a little insight there?
Well, yeah. And Utah had a loss to LA on Monday after being on a 4-game road trip and then playing their 3rd game in 4 nights, which I had predicted would be a loss for them, and it was. We're going to find out on Wednesday when Chicago hosts New York Rangers whether they can play well their first game back home. And then we'll see on Thursday when Dallas goes into Minnesota, their former home, by the way. The Dallas Stars used to be the Minnesota North Stars, but this time they go into St. Paul and play the Minnesota Wild, and the Wild trying to win their first game at home after a road trip.
Smith's picks. How underwhelming a night that you didn't lose a game in regulation, but still went 2-0-3.
Yeah. Well, there was some teams that lost last night that you would never imagine would lose.
We'll take another shot at it on Wednesday with a 4-game schedule. Short shifts coming up on Friday and once again next Monday. NHL Wraparound returns next Wednesday, December 17th. On behalf of Neil, I am Vic. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.